Hello again and welcome to another 140k Morning Glory video, and today guys I want to say a huge thank you to James McLeod for sending in some awesome pictures of his Praetorian forces. Those beautiful white pith helmets glittering in the sun whilst they defend a line of sandbags against, well, probably some orcs knowing the Battle of Big Tooth River. Really love this army, James. Thanks for the pictures, full of so many cool conversions with the Ogryns, with pith helmets, the cavalry. It's just perfect. So massive thank you to James for sending these pictures in. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, then please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com. And don't worry if you are like me and you're an Ogryn who's not had his bone and surgery. There's no way you're going to be able to remember that. Links and emails are down in the description below. But without further ado, let's crack on with today's video. So today guys, I want to talk about something that seems to be really popular at the moment in the Warhammer 40k community. Is the game changing too quickly? Is it being tweaked too often? Because it always seems like there's a balance patch coming out, or a points change, or an FAQ, or a codex, or a new Warzone book. There always seems to be something that is changing in Warhammer 40k. And so what I want to talk about is almost like a good, the bad, and the ugly of the constant tweaks and changes that GW are applying to the game. So let's just dive straight into that now. I think the first thing to acknowledge is that it seems that there are a lot of changes happening in 40k at once. And I think if you compare it, especially 9th edition, to previous editions, the game is certainly a lot more alive at the moment. Back in, let's say, 6th and 7th edition, anything really prior to 8th edition, what you tend to find is a codex would come out, and that would be it. There weren't really any FAQs, and if it was utterly broken, then it would pretty much stay utterly broken. And another thing to sort of acknowledge is that not every codex, not every faction got a new codex every edition. For example, the 5th edition Guard codex lasted Guard all through 5th and then most of 6th, but then Guard only got a 6th edition codex that had to last them all the way through 6th and 7th. So it wasn't a guarantee that you would get a codex, and if you did get one and it wasn't great, you were kind of stuck with it. Now, there were kind of advantages and disadvantages to having this system. I mean, firstly, at least the game was kind of stable in some ways. I mean, GW is always releasing new faction books and new formations and campaign books and that kind of stuff. But by and large, when you had your codex, you knew what you had. And by and large, when you were getting into the game and you were trying to find out, let's say you wanted to play competitively, what the best faction was, it was relatively easy for you to understand that. It's like, okay, I'm going to go and get Eldar, I'm going to go and get Tau, I'm going to go and get Necrons. Like, this is the most broken faction and I want to play competitively, so this is what I'm going to go and get. The flip side of that was, if you weren't that bothered about playing competitively, or you just particularly loved one faction, like, well, loads of people here, we just love Guard. It doesn't really matter if Guard is good or bad, we just love Guard, right? But the problem is that if Guard gets a bad codex, then you're just stuck with it for years on end, and it's a little bit frustrating. So there's a plus and a negative to having that other system. Now, if you compare that to where 9th edition and 8th edition is now, every faction is guaranteed to get a new codex. New factions are pretty much constantly released. Like, we're getting squats now, and we had Gene Silicult in 8th edition. There's new factions are constantly being released. There's more books, there's more factions, there's more variety, there's more spice to ever pick from now. And so, in many ways, that's a good thing, because it means that you know that it doesn't really matter what faction you pick, it's going to get a codex, it's going to get an update. Another advantage you could say of, so that's kind of looking at the pace of like codex and stuff, but looking at the other changes as well, the constant balance changes, the constant balance tweaks, it's kind of, again, in a funny sort of way, it's both a good thing and a bad thing. You see, it could be considered a good thing because you're like, well, it doesn't really matter which faction I pick. I'm just going to pick the one that I like. Because the game is constantly changing, and sometimes my faction is going to be on top and sometimes it's not. There's always these balance tweaks. There's always these changes to the meta. I almost don't need to worry about picking a top faction because it might not be top by the time I've got the army together, or I don't need to worry about picking a bad faction because by the time I've got the army together it might be a good faction again. So in many ways it's like, oh, okay, so just pick whatever you want, which is nice. It's good to have that sort of feeling. However, on the flip side, there's a couple of things that don't make that quite true. Oh my god, Mordian Glory's lying to us. Well, before you get the pitch, guys, hear me out. The problem is that certain factions seem to stay on top longer than others anyway. And so, for example, when you look at things like Dark Elder, who literally dominated the game for 6 months, and when you've had factions like Tau and Tyranids, who, despite the fact that they've been taking some big whacks on the head with the Nerf hammer at the moment, they're still going very strong. And yet, you've had loads of buffs being applied to Guard, but it's taken us literally up until this point in 9th edition, what we're almost 2-3 years into 9th edition now. We've been playing, for quite a while, and for over 2 years, we've been a terrible faction. And now we're finally at this point where we're like a usable faction. So it would be great if things were constantly changing and every faction had an equal amount of time in the sun, but that doesn't seem to be the case. However, the other problem is that you have those people that want to play regularly and they're pretty into the building and hobbying side of it, but maybe they're not got a huge collection. Maybe they're literally trying to get into the game for the first time. And so they're like, I want to get a Guard army, okay? And I want to get a mechanized Guard army. That's great. And so they see right now, they go on my channel, they see these videos and they're like, oh, well, yeah, Mech Guard's doing really well. Great. And so they spend maybe 6 months building and painting a Mech Guard army, and it looks beautiful, and they're fine, and they played a few practice games with it, and it feels great, and they finally like, right, I've finally got my 2,000 points together, because I've got a job, I've got a family, and I can't just like knock out 2,000 points at a weekend or anything like that, and they finally get everything together, and they're about to go to a tournament, and suddenly the latest Warzone book drops, and it's like, oh, well, now my army's rubbish. So it's a barrier to entry, because these people are trying to constantly keep ahead. And maybe that person will go, okay, well, now I need to buy like 14 rusts for my army, fine, I'll do it. Or maybe that person will go, fuck this, I don't want to play 40k, I've just wasted 6 months of my finite existence on this earth. Okay? Like, I'm out. I'm just going to sell it and I'm just going to recruit my officers. Or I'm just not going to buy anything and I'm just kind of just going to drift into other game systems which don't change. Slight tangent here, guys, but one of the biggest positives I hear people gushing about other game systems, for example, oh, here he goes again. For example, bolt action is that people play bolt action in between booms and busts of 40k, right? And they're like, right, I'm gonna really get into bolt action. It's absolutely fantastic, and they spend like months and months and months building and painting and researching the army. And then they get to play the army, and it's just what they imagined. It plays exactly how they wanted it to play because the game hasn't changed. And then maybe something comes along. Maybe they get, decide to want to play some video games for a bit. Maybe they decide to want to come back to 40k for a bit. And then they end up, when something changes or they decide they've got a bit more time in their life for games again, they come back to what action and they're like, and I just pick my army up, and it's like I just pick up exactly where I left off. Nothing's changed. I don't have to relearn anything. I can literally step into the game, out of the game, and back into the game with zero worries, zero pressure. Okay? And that's one of the great things, honestly, that I hear people gushing about bot action all the time. Me personally, and again, this is the last sort of thing I'm going to say, and then we're going to get back to the 40k guys. I got into my Japanese with bot action initially, and so I built and bought and painted and played a few games with my Japanese army, but there weren't as many people playing bot action at the time, so I kind of just put the army to one side, started playing 40k for a bit, and then bot action started exploding in my gaming area, and I just pulled this army out, and it worked, and it was literally like a year later. Can you imagine putting a Warhammer 40k army in storage and pulling it out a year later and not having to change anything about your list? It's almost, it's alien, it's unfathomable, it's Xenos, do you know what I mean? So there is, bringing that back round to 40k, like right now, I've just had some messages off my brother, Johnny, Scholar Progenium, and he's like, oh man, you've been really talking about all the great things about like Armor Contempt and Marines, and finally want to get back into like my Blood Angels, come on the channel, let's do some more battle ports. And I've been like, yeah man, that's amazing. And he's like, but I've just been, and that was like a weekend ago, right? And then now he's literally messaged me first thing on the beginning of the week, and he's like, oh, I've realised that CP's changes, and what I don't have to pay for like my warlord traits and my relics now, and I have to relearn all my secondaries, and I can just tell he's on the cusp of going, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to go back to Gaslands, go back to bot action. I'm not that bothered about it. And this is a guy which literally has probably about 20,000 points of of Blood Angels. He's got multiple Forge World units. He's got like maxed out Death Company, maxed out Sanguinary Guard. He's got a list that he could literally just put onto the table and it'd be great, but he just doesn't want to have to relearn the game, because when he ducked out of it about 8 months ago and he comes back to it, it's totally changed. So that is a player that was about to return and has gone, no. And this was another thing, and I know like I'm ragging on 40k, I'm going to come back around to it. I want to end the video on a positive note, okay? And so I was chatting to some people down at the club, at my Warhammer club recently, and a lot of them have been getting into bolt action, and they literally learn the game. I do one intro game and they go, right, I'm hooked, and they've learnt it, and they go out and they buy the models and they're having a great time. And we were chatting, me and a couple of other people were chatting, we were like, oh, it's so easy to get into bolt action, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, and people were like, oh, why do you think bolt action is like exploding so much? And I was like, can you imagine, can you realise how easy it is to get into bolt action, right? You just learn it, right? Can you imagine trying to teach someone 40k for the first time right now? Like right now, someone who's never played a war game before, can you imagine trying to teach them 40k? You couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. You know? I mean, it's really, really difficult, because you can't just pick up your book and just learn from your book. You can't just pick up the rule book and learn from the rule book. Like, the rule book is essentially useless now. You know, your codex is essentially useless now. So you've just got to try and find this tangled web of online things. And yeah, I couldn't teach someone 40k right now, I'm telling you that. Anyway, bringing it back. So we've been ragging on 40k for a bit. So that we've seen sort of the positives and we've seen some of the negatives from like a hobbying point of view. Now let's take a look at what I think is actually a really, really big positive from a gameplay point of view. So as someone who plays in a lot of Warhammer 40k tournaments, okay, and as someone who has an extensive hobby and model collection, and I can draw upon pretty much anything, and I can ride the waves of meta change, right? As that kind of demographic, right? The current state of 40k, the constant flux and living rule set, is actually really, really nice. And I know some people are going to get upset with me for saying that, because, you know, people love being salty about 40k. But it's really nice. The meta is constantly fresh. I go from one tournament to the next, and it's a different experience every single time. I get to build a list, and then I get to, you know, play it for a while, and then the meta shifts, and I get to have the excitement and the pleasure of building more lists. Like right now, I am always thinking and building about new ways to use my Imperial Guard. It's never ever the same list. Okay, it's always different. Sometimes I'm thinking double heavy flamer cameras, sometimes I'm thinking more conscripts, sometimes I'm thinking more artillery, sometimes I'm thinking more Leman Russes. Like the list, it's always constantly changing, and the games are constantly changing. 3 months ago, if I'd played into Custodes with a pure tank guard army, I would have been smashed. Now I've just been to a tournament where I played literally pure Leman Russes, a meme list into Custodes, and I smashed them. The game is constantly being kept fresh and interesting and exciting, and if you have the ability to ride those waves, if you're willing to put the time and effort and, let's be quite frank, money into staying up to date with the changes and constantly chasing the meta and enjoying the nice sort of waves of the meta, then it's actually a really fun experience. And I'm not lying to you here, guys. I'm not just, you know, being a GW shill or anything like that. I am really enjoying competitive 40k at the moment, because it's always shifting, and it always seems like, whilst there might be 1 or 2 factions which sort of pull ahead and maybe on top of the pack, the sort of middle of the pack, where I love that middle of the pack at a tournament, it's always changing. Sometimes you're getting, you know, you're having a close game with Harlequins, sometimes you're getting smashed by Eternists, but then, you know, you get that game out of the way and you get to play some other armies. Sometimes, you know, you're having a good time against Marines. It's always changing. You know, one list I'm bringing Scions, the next list I'm bringing Met Guard, the next list I'm bringing Infantry Guard. It's always shifting, and it's nice, and it keeps the game fresh, and it keeps it interesting. One thing I would say that 9th edition was suffering from before they started doing the season thing was that everyone had just got very, very used to the missions. You know, oh, it's 5 objectives. Oh, no, it's 6 objectives. Oh, I've got to hold 1 or 2 or more. And like, it was very, very samey. And because the secondaries weren't really changing, people were just like, well, I guess I'll just build a list that sticks with these secondaries, and then it'll just be like that for the rest of the edition. You know, that's what it was like. And now, we're not like that. Now it's like, okay, well, you know, you can build a list around those secondaries for the next, like, 3 to 6 months, but then you better start thinking about what the next is going to be, what the next is going to be, what the next is going to be. So, I know I'm basically the same thing over and over again, but I'm kind of trying to draw on different examples. But what I'm saying is, guys, right now, competitive 40k is very, very fresh. It's very, very interesting. And there's always, you know, a new top dog. I mean, think about it. For how long was Guard just in the toilet for 9th edition? And then suddenly we've had this, you know, balance patch and points changes, and we've had some extra rules took out of us, and suddenly how many Guard players have come out of the woodwork? They're slapping Bane Blades on the table, they're using all sorts of different variety of lists. We've stopped seeing endless posts about, oh yeah, I've just been tabled, oh, you know, how are you ever meant to play with Guard, blah, blah, blah. And now every time I'm on, like, you know, the Facebook or the Reddit for Guard, it's like, oh yeah, just tabled Tau in turn 3, oh yeah, just smash this Marine play, oh yeah, yeah. The Guard community has been totally revitalised. Totally and utterly revitalised by some free changes. We didn't need to buy the changes, guys. We didn't need to wait for our codex to come out. We literally just got all of these free updates, and now you're seeing Guard players coming out of the woodwork, and they're having a great time. And this whole like sub community in 40k is now, you're seeing it in tournaments more often, and you're seeing people having more fun with it. So at the end of the day, whilst you can say there's a lot of negatives with having the living rule set, there are advantages to it as well. I mean, not to labour the point, guys, but a week ago, would you have seen anyone running a command squad with a flag, a voxcaster, and a medic? No, like, it's insane. You never would have believed that. But now, not only are they really cool, but they're actually good on the tabletop. They get you secondary points. And so, to kind of like summarise this whole video up, what I would say is that the living rule set it is a double-edged sword. Okay, and the game is changing a lot, and we can't deny that. And for a lot of people, the changing of the game is certainly a barrier to entry when it comes to learning the game, and maybe from the hobbying point of view. But for those people that are kind of like, right, I'm committed to 40k, I just love building and painting and playing it, it's actually great because you can just build and paint whatever you want, because you know that it will be good at some point, and you can constantly be having a fresh new experience because the lists are constantly changing. So there are these positives and negatives that we've seen. And that's it for today's video. So let me know what you guys are thinking. These are just my opinions, and you know, that's just like my opinion, man. So I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. Are you loving the constant changes, keeping your army list fresh and exciting? Are you hating the fact that every single time you finally get something put together, it's out of date? Let me know down in the comment section below. If you've really enjoyed today's video, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe and a comment. To be honest with you guys, any extra interactivity you can give the video really boosts it, and really helps with the almighty YouTube algorithm. Praise be to the mighty YouTube algorithm. So, like I said, anyway, anything extra you can do is really, really appreciated. If you've really enjoyed today's video and you'd like to go the extra mile for supporting the channel, please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It's thanks to my members, it's thanks to my Patreons that I'm able to do this gig full time now, which, to be honest, is just totally mind blowing. So massive thank you to every single one of my channel members and Patreon supporters. I just want to do a quick shout out for the latest people that have signed up. So massive thank you to True Elite Geek, Che, Ocho Miniatures, Kirby Tucker, Justin Cogrillion, Lady Cubed, Yakuzi, Kaylee Roxner and Thomas McDonald for signing up and becoming channel members. Massive thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to say thank you to the latest Patreons as well. So massive thank you to the Iceni Chief, FPS Gaz, Ickbard, Verido255, Feros, James P, Zillion, Max Zizu, Naril and Alex Stengal. Massive thank you to every single one of you guys. I also want to take a moment here and just say a personal, heartfelt thank you to all of the top tier Patreon supporters. These are the people that have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty when it comes to supporting the Mordian Glory channel. And quite frankly, guys, their generosity is just humbling. So a personal thank you to August Varney, Alex Stengal, John Stubbs, Nicholas Walsh, and Swordfish Trombone for being signed up at the Lord General level, the highest tier of Patreon support. And I also want to say a personal thank you to Diesel Fox, Ross Miller and Tom Sutton for being signed up at the Commissar level as well. Another really high tier Patreon support. Guys, you know how much I appreciate it, and just massive thank you. This is just off the cuff. Like, it's maybe I should edit it out, but I'm not going to because I want it to come across as, like, you know, genuine, because it is. Like, guys, just thank you. I really, truly, honestly appreciate all of your support. But we'll leave it there for today's video. Massive thank you. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.